On the other hand, their wisdom and insight shows them how they can live surrounded by laws that are not good and still be right themselves. Actually, the alchemist is no longer just a citizen of the country in which he is born. This point was well made by the Greeks and by many of the ancient peoples. Namely, that it is a mistake to assume that there are only certain realms in which the human being can function. There are not only the gods above of the Greeks and mortality below. There are something in between. This in-between thing has been in theology made into the hierarchies of the angels and archangels and so forth. But in the classical times, there was a state between mortality and divinity. And this was the state of the heroes, the heroic state. Or as one Rosicrucian said, there is a race that exists on a plane above us, made up only of those who have been born into it through their own wisdom. And they are called the servants of the Generalissimo of the world. So this race, so to say, this superior order, this heroic order, is composed of those who in this world have achieved freedom from negation and have dedicated themselves with those who have gone before to the ultimate service of all that lives. These heroic powers, which we develop through our own integrities, become the basis of a release from the mistakes that have been made. Once we have this correct inside knife, we know why things happen to us. We are no longer moved by the things that we call joy and sorrow. We live in a state of truth in which all things have their own right and natural existence. We are not subject to any of the calamities that befall ignorance, because we are no longer ignorant. And no matter what is done with civilization, no matter how many laws men pass to improve each other's condition, suffering, sorrow, and death will endure as long as the causes of them have not been corrected within the plan of things. So in alchemy, as we see it, we can face into a great many interesting and remarkable facts. We can say something that primitive people, for some unknown reason, have long sensed. Sophistication has been a blinding factor. When we began to overestimate ourselves, we underestimated everything else. And when we began to think of our own magnificence, we forgot that we are tiny pebbles along the shore of a vast ocean. So that we have to gradually get back to a certain simplicity. Nearly all primitive peoples have encountered one level of relationship with life that is important. They don't understand everything. Perhaps they are merely shamanistic peoples. But they do, most primitive people, have a realization of the tremendous integrities of some power, something greater than themselves. On various levels they interpret this power. To some it's ancestor, to others it's totem, to some others it's the beloved dead, to still others it is monados, or great ones who walk among the mountains. But in every case, these people have a natural esotericism. They have natural mystical qualities which they have not outgrown by sophistication. Now, it's true that these faculties are genuine in many instances, and it is also true that they have gradually dropped out of sight. Well, the answer to that is also understandable. The reason why primitive psychism has gradually faded away is because it again became a blind alley. Primitive psychism kept the individual from actually realizing the realities. It was a kind of protection. It was as though parents were taking care of children, and the child turned to the parent for everything, or turned to the teacher for everything. But after a while, the child grows up to the point where it must make its own decisions. It must no longer lean or depend. It can no longer depend for its survival upon some benevolent power beyond its understanding. It must actually learn to stand, to live, to become a being, and transmute negative natural relationships into positive natural cooperations. It is not enough that we should believe in a summer land beyond the grave. It is that we should have the intelligence and the intellect to use all of our extrasensory perceptions as nature intended. Service. To use them entirely to help to discover this divine reality, which is the end and goal of our search while we remain in the human stage of development. So we have to keep on working with this problem. We have a lunch and we eat something. And this something mysteriously gets absorbed, transformed. We don't tell the stomach what to do. Sometimes we put it in a position where it can't do anything. Under such conditions, it becomes a little resentful. Then we bring out the bicarbonate of soda. But all the processes of the body, from the beating of the heart to the nutrition of cells, everything that happens within this circumference of our skin is incredible. It is a miracle upon miracles every moment. There seems to be no way in which we can explain the wisdom of body cells, that we can actually realize the conscious cooperation of tissues. We cannot understand these things, because in some mysterious way our mind has sort of outgrown being a small cell, and we are now interested in trying to be a greater cell somewhere else. But actually, the miracle of existence is present to us every moment. It is present to us in the birth of every child that comes into the world. It is in us in every proof of the continual principle of life that is transferred from one generation to another. How, we do not know. We can see only certain physical symptoms, symbols, procedures, but the great transmission of life is beyond human understanding. Therefore, we have a little world, a little island of thoughtfulness in a great ocean of the unknown. We are constantly seeking to know more, but because of the peculiar dulling of our instruments, we have gradually turned away from the search for the unknowable to the gradual refinement of things that we do immediately see some value coming from. But actually, this one thing that we don't see is the only thing that is important. It is the basis of law. Within it is the absolute way in which everything has to be done. Within it is the proof of human growth. Within it is the release by which the individual gradually, step by step, actually grows up into a divine nature. And sometime in the infinite of things may be a God in his own right. But all these things are based upon an energy, what the alchemists called the spirit or souls of the metals. The souls of the metals can be brought together, and here is a very interesting point. Von Welling, in his Opus Qabbalisticum, points out that no metal can be combined with another metal in its present state. One gross metal cannot be amalgam to another gross metal in terms of alchemy. Before an element can become mingled with another element, it must be sublimated itself and its own individuality overcome. It must cease to have separateness before it can be united with anything else. Therefore, the essences of the metals can be combined, but the bodies of the metals cannot be combined. To form, that is, they can be combined on a physical level for purposes of hardware, but not in terms of mystical understanding. So before any form of knowledge can be united to another form of knowledge. Both of these elements must be subjected to and reduced to their principle. Therefore, we have to go behind what is known. We have to break through knowledge in the sense of tradition. We have to break through knowledge in the sense that it is a binding power. When we say, I know, and what we are really doing is quoting from a text from Harvard or Oxford, this won't do it. None of the knowledge that comes from the outside, in its natural outside form, can be united with any other form of knowledge on the outside. Therefore,